Hello, welcome back to our garden. Now if you've not grown sweet corn before, you can just get in here, Mrs. W. You can really see how the whole sweet corn thing works. So in the top of the plant, these are the males, and as the wind blows, and this is a bit breezy today, it will drop its pollen down into the plant. And if you look here, you can see that this plant is definitely going to have 2 cobs on it. Already started. So that has pollinated that and that. And it's done by the wind. And if you look, there are 1, 2, 3 plants in the row. And as the wind goes about and does this, it pollinates the plant. Actually, I'll tell you what, Mrs. W, on this plant here, there are actually 3 forming.
Are they really?
Yeah. Come you in here.
I've never known them to have 3.
No, look. 1, 2, 3.
There is, yes. Yeah. Superb.
Absolutely amazing. And yeah, there's a really good picture. Yeah.
Sometimes when the flowers, because they are like tiny little flowers that produce the pollen, when they are open, you can see the pollen blowing from them, can't you?
You can. Yeah. And it's absolutely, fantastic. I'm so glad that this is happening, and it looks like we're going to get a really good harvest of sweet corn during August.
Lovely.
We are right at the very end of July now, but our grandchildren absolutely adore sweet corn, don't they?
They do.
And it'll be sweet corn are one of those plants where you can't succession sow. They all go in at the same time. Some do produce their cobs slightly later in the season and some slightly earlier. But in the main, they're all sown at the same time. They're all planted in the ground at the same time. And within probably 4 weeks, they will harvest at the same time. So this will probably be one of the things that we'll focus on, and how you can preserve these in order that you can enjoy this lovely sweet taste of summer for the rest of the year. Now, in today's video, we have quite a few seeds to sow, ready to replace some of the plants that will be coming out of this garden over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And also, our seed potatoes have arrived for potatoes that we can plant now, and got a lovely taste of new potatoes in late autumn and early winter. Now, it's just about a week or so since we put in our runner beans and our French beans, and you can see that they're coming along quite nicely. They're already starting to climb up the cattle fencing. So yeah, they are a little way away from being able to produce beans, but luckily we have planted some elsewhere just a little earlier, haven't we? So it won't be too long before we actually will be able to taste some nice runner beans. And it's a good idea, once these sort of get to round about this tall, is to just help them along and just wrap them around whatever support you're using. Now, with runner beans, they do actually go anti-clockwise, don't they?
They do.
Which,
yeah, so that's the way
instead of clockwise. A couple of videos back when we planted this, as you know, we sort of angled them over to the structure. Now that they've got to sort of this size, what we can do is actually start to give them a bit of a hand. And that plant will now naturally do its thing and start to climb up your structure. And you remember we talked about ladybirds, and somebody actually commented on the plants that, you know, with these going a bit later, that the ladybirds would be a baby. Look at this, Mrs. W. There's actually a ladybird here. Look, she's doing her job, bless her.
Yes. Can I get it? Yeah, there she is. Or as we like to call them in Norfolk, Bishy Barnabies.
That's the one. That's the one. Only a select few know the meaning of that one. So, let's go and sow some seeds, and hopefully we don't get any French bean seeds in the ones that we want to sow. I have had 1 or 2 people that have applied for the job. I'm telling you, Mrs. W, you're on notice. You join us at the outdoor potting bench. Mrs. W is just sowing our next lot of seeds. And really, I'm only here just to ensure that we don't get any more French bean seeds, because we have more than enough of those. Now, in all seriousness, as I say to you guys, you always want to be sowing. The worst thing that can happen is that you have too many, or you run out of room, and these things will then just go onto your compost heap. We're going to start off with some kohlrabi. And we're going to try 2 types. One we grew last year, and this. Which was the green delicacy. And just as we like to this time of year with brassicas, we try and sow a couple of seeds per cell, and then we'll thin to the strongest seedling. So in theory, we should have something hopefully germinate in every cell. Now the other kohlrabi that we're looking to grow is Super Schmelz. That's the one we haven't tried before. So next we want to sow some more kale. We already have some kale in the ground, and that's not going to be long before we can actually start harvesting. But we're going to sow some now in order that we can continue enjoying it throughout the year. So that was the black magic, and the next ones are the curly kale. We do like some curly kale, don't we, Mrs. W?
The sun is really hot when it comes out, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
A mixture of weather today.
Yeah. A few rows of spring onion. As I said many times, we like to keep repeat sowing those. And as we get into next month, into August, we shall actually be sowing the ones that will overwinter, ready for next year. And then what's the last one we need to sow here?
These are Valkyrin. I think that's how it's pronounced.
Cauliflower, which should mature late next year.
Oh, I think I've just made a mistake because I've written cabbage.
This is how I get French beans in the middle of my seed pots, folks.
I thought they were a cabbage, I'm sorry.
So that's the tray filled up with water. Again, we'll just stand those in there like we have the others. And within the next 15 to 20 minutes, that will have become damp enough to help the seeds germinate. So just to ensure that we do have a good supply all the way through the autumn and winter months, we have some kohlrabi, some kale, Romanesco, some cabbage, cauliflower, and of course we've also multi-sown our spring onion, and we'll multi-sow those with anything up to 6 to 8 seeds, sometimes even 10. Now, just for a change, we're ahead of the curveball. Normally we're so busy, or we're taking holidays with the children and the grandchildren, that over the last couple of 3 years, planting potatoes that you can get a harvest for in late November into December have been a secondary thought to us. So we thought, oh, we better do them now. But actually a really great time to do them is late July and August. And it's a good idea if you're going to do this to actually do them in tubs. Because there will come a time later on this year when the weather will get very cold and we will experience our first few frosts. And with them being in tubs, of course, they're more mobile. You can pick them up and you can move them to a place of cover. So they can either go in our greenhouse or they can go in our polytunnel. And that will just keep the frost off the leaves. Now, it's not something you have to do, but it's something that myself and Mrs. W love to do. Some years we get really good crops, some years not so good, especially the ones when we plant in September.
Yeah. We're very hopeful for this year being slightly better.
But for very little cost, you can have a go, and really, if you can get the crop, they are lovely. Absolutely lovely, and it's such a great time of the year to actually get some nice new potatoes. Now, what I have done is save ourselves a bit of money. We are reusing the compost that was in these tubs earlier this year when we grew our new potatoes and second earlies. Not all of them, because actually we still have some down the bottom of the garden that we've not eaten yet. But as they become empty, we recycle this. And how do I recycle it? Well, I mix a little bit of our own homemade compost in with it. I grow 2 types of potato. These are Mrs. W's favourite, which is Charlotte.
Yes.
And we're also going to be growing some Maris pear. Unlike the potatoes earlier in the year, you don't need to worry about chitting these. The weather is lovely and warm, and they will shoot away and get going, no problem. What you are trying to do earlier in the season is to get yourself a little bit further ahead, so when you receive those, in January time, you set those out to chit, and by the time you plant them in the ground, they'll have a shoot like so, about 1 inch long, and that just enables the crop to come just that little bit earlier. And for many of us, where you don't have too much space, that's really beneficial, because the potatoes can come out that little bit earlier and you can then get another crop in there. But like I say, we don't need to worry about that with these late potatoes. Now I'm going to be planting 2 potatoes per tub. I don't need lots of them, because we'll have our main crop potatoes even over the Christmas period. And we do like roast potatoes, don't we? After all the heavy eating during Christmas, like Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, sometimes Boxing Day, it's really lovely to come out here and just get some nice new potatoes. And if you're just having some cold cuts, which we often do on Boxing Day, don't we?
Yeah.
You can enjoy that in the evening with some lovely, fresh, tasting new potatoes. So it is worth actually giving it a go. What have you got to lose? The price of some seed potato, especially if, like us, you're recycling the compost that you have. So now it's just a case of covering them up. At this time of the year, you may need to give them some water if it doesn't rain. That probably won't be quite such a problem as we get into the autumn period. Although, given what happened last year, Mrs. W, you never know. No. Now, these potatoes will only produce potatoes from the roots at the bottom, so we don't need to really worry about earthing up. So therefore I'm going to fill these almost to the top. And there you have it. Some nice Charlotte potatoes that can grow away nicely, hopefully give us a bountiful harvest sometime in November. So we've planted our seed potatoes so that we can have new potatoes back end of November and into December. And they've gone in nice and early, so that's really good, so they should get a good start to life. And being here this side of our greenhouse, when the weather does turn inclement and we do start to see those first frosts, then it's not going to be too much of an effort just to move these from here and into the greenhouse. And of course here we have all the seeds that you saw Mrs. W sowing earlier. And while I've been putting those potatoes into those tubs, as you know, these went into these trays, and you can see they've sucked up quite a nice amount of water now. And I really do actually quite like these, because you can see they have raised ridges, so therefore these don't ever get waterlogged. Once they've sucked up enough water and the water falls below, as you can see here, below these ridges, these simply are not going to get waterlogged. And they are bought especially to go with these modules. And we'll leave them like that now for the next week or so. And then if we feel they do need watering again, we'll just fill up the reservoir and they can suck that up once again. Advantage to us and anyone else that uses them is that you're not splashing your seed about everywhere with a watering can and the rose. You can really nice and gently pull the water up. And we shall come back and look at these again sometime during mid to late August, won't we? When hopefully we have plants that are sort of that tall and they'll be ready to go into the plots.
Fingers crossed. No dwarf French beans.
Yes. Now do let us know in the comments box below the things that you've been sowing for successional plantings. Do let us know if you're going to be growing potatoes to get new potatoes the latter part of this year, and if so, what varieties. We always do love to get your comments. Now, have a great gardening week, and we shall see you on the next one.